All right, several major corporations have been outed for their donations to Texas Republicans who voted for the anti-abortion bill that recently went into law. The site Popular Information and Ultraviolet compiled a list of major donors who said they donated to lawmakers on both sides of the political spectrum. The monies are not a sign of support for particular bills. The following companies have donated more than $100,000. AT&T, Charter Communications, Berkshire Hathaway, Exelon, UnitedHealth Group, Union Pacific, Chevron, Charter Communications, Farmers Insurance. Now, the new bill in Texas bans abortions after 6 weeks, causing outrage from abortion advocates nationwide. So the question, Amisha, these companies say they support both sides, but what do you make of people who say they're not going to be targeting companies as a result of their support of Texas Republicans? This is very similar to what we saw in Georgia as well.
At the end of the day, Roland, I don't think that there's a both sides debate to when it comes to basically limiting women's right to choose. Abortion is women's health. Abortion is health care. Abortion will always be health care. And watching this debate funnel its way down on some crazy right-wing religious mantra that we've heard for decades now, I think is completely ridiculous. What I do see with these corporations is that by and large, they are being honest here. They have donated almost equally in some cases in states where there are Republican leaders as well as Democrat leaders across this country. They basically hedge their bets on who they can call at any given point in any given state to have a bill sponsored or passed that actually fits their bidding. So I think that we do have to keep that in mind as well. These organizations have supported as many liberal bills as they have Republican ones across the nation. So I think that it would be very difficult in some senses to boycott things like Comcast, ComEd, things like that, Exelon, and also on the one hand boycott it in Texas, but then look at the great progress that they've been able to create in terms of education or criminal justice reform in states like Illinois, my home state. The frustrating part is I think that we have to dig deeper, because when it comes to policy, there are a lot of private organizations, private corporations that basically deliver cash cows to both sides of the aisle whenever it benefits their billing. So I think that there's a lot deeper here, and the bigger frustration should be amongst those Republican legislators who have decided that this is the mantle they want to take up, that they want to push it this far, that they want to ignore, and even in many ways push it further than we've seen conservatives push before historically in terms of limiting a woman's rights. But largely, I think that this is a conversation that is beyond that of private sector corporations who this is what they do, this is what they've been doing, and honestly, they teeter their horn on both sides of the aisle here on various issues. So this is actually nothing new.
Well, it's nothing new, but I must say this here, Scott Bolden, when it comes to activism, bottom line is the way you want to get the top politicians' attention is if you affect their money source. That's why this matters.
Yeah, but most of those companies, Fortune 500 companies that can give that type of money, their lobbyists are lobbying them on business issues. They may or may not agree with the social justice issues of these individual state reps as well as federal reps, but they really are giving this money for tax policies, business policies, and that's not a cop-out in my commentary. It's just reality. And so I don't think you're going to be able to stop that type of money in politics and influence from folks. What you have to do is, if you're big on social causes and you have a PAC, and you are a socially liberal corporation of means, then you've got to outspend those who will give money to the sponsors for this Texas bill, anti-abortion. You got to outspend them. You got to out-fundraise them. You can chase those cartwheels or those windmills all you want, but in the end, money is still the mother's milk of politics, and you got to outspend them. And even then, it may not work with these votes that they have coming up. They have tens of votes, hundreds of votes each session. And so it's a race against your opponents, not only to outspend them, but also to out-lobby them. And so, I mean, I think it's a wash. It's a good idea, and certainly it's offensive at its core. But at the same time, there are thousands of issues these corporations are vying for at the state level, and on some life-changing issues on the business side. So you got to outspend them. Otherwise, it's just the same old fight.
I don't necessarily agree with that, Jeff, primarily because if you look at apartheid, you look at divestment, you look at how critical that was, and how it had a significant impact on changing politicians and public policy in order to be able to, because again, when you start messing with the money, and that's what I tell people all the time, in America, when you start messing with the money, it's amazing how people then choose to begin to listen to you.
Sure. And you're absolutely right. When you hit an entity, including America, in its pocket, things are going to change. We learned this in the 60s. But to go along with what Amisha was saying and to reinforce what Scott was saying, we have a different era now. We're living in different times. So things are a little bit different. The area that you're standing in right now, right behind Jubilee Hall, if you walk out of the front door and take a right turn, you're going to hit a street called Jefferson. Jefferson Street was the historically black center of Nashville, Tennessee. Jimi Hendrix played on Jefferson Street. Ray Charles played on Jefferson Street. Many R&B artists came through this space and played in places like the Era. On Jefferson Street alone, you have Tennessee State University, where I went to school. You have Fisk University, hello Fiskites, where my wife went to school. You have Meharry Medical College there. Then you have that entire strip that used to be a thriving business community until the interstate came through in the 1960s and broke that community apart. There was a time when you could go out on Jefferson Street, rally 3 colleges together, get students like Diane Nash, C.T. Vivian, to go out and knock on doors. John Lewis at American Baptist College, 10 minutes up the street. They would rally neighbors. They would rally people, march downtown. They would boycott. They would do what they needed to do because this was an all-inclusive community. Right now, you can come out of Jubilee Hall and take a left, and you're going to see white people jogging, throwing Frisbees with their dogs. Entire parts of the country have now changed and gentrified. Our housing patterns have made it so that it's tough for us to now stage the level of boycotts that we could stage in the 60s when we had communities that were tight-knit. That's not to say that we cannot still operate from the space of hitting them in the pocket, but there has to be a consistent and comprehensive strategy going forward that also takes in mind how we pressure our politicians to hold their funders accountable, how we hold companies accountable for who they're funding and the legislation that is there. Every single person, every single corporate entity, every single organization that's a nonprofit out there is operating from one principle, and that is self-interest. So they are funding politicians who are going to advance their self-interest. If we can find a way to bring our self-interest to the table and focus on cutting off the money on that end, that's a smart strategy, and you're absolutely right there. But there are people who will say, you know what, I'm tired of AT&T. I saw that they just gave $291,000 to this cause in Texas. I'm going to change my service. I'm going to switch over to Cricket in Tennessee. Well, Cricket uses AT&T's network. I'm going to change my health care from UnitedHealth Care. UnitedHealth Care has a number of subsidiaries, including a number of organizations and a number of health plans that serve TennCare and Medicaid, the poorest of the poor, and allow them to have access. So really, how deep in the weeds are we willing to get when we're talking about choking the financial neck of America and actually making change?
Folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. folks, CEEK.com is a black-owned company founded by Mary Spiel. It's a virtual reality company where you can actually go there, look at their virtual reality content. A couple of devices they actually have for sale that you might be interested in. First off, their VR headset allows for you to slide your phone right in and experience that virtual reality content on their site or watch a 360-degree video. Also, there are 360-degree headphones, tremendous bass, used for gaming, Bluetooth, phone calls, you name it. Folks, you can get these two at CEEK.com using this promo code RMVIP21, RMVIP21. You buy one or the other, or even both. A portion of the proceeds come back to us here at Roland Martin Unfiltered. And so we want you to check out CEEK.com and give it a try.